A Fox News alert, the New York Times reporting that ISIS leaders in Syria dispatched highly trained terror operatives to Europe long before the attacks in Paris and Brussels, and that European officials failed to connect the dots. And we told you about this headline that caught our attention in the first hour of Happening Now. And with us to discuss it a little bit more is Tom Joscelyn. He's a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and a senior editor of the Long War Journal. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
So how far does this web of terrorists spread?
Well, I think the important point here is that this is the external operations arm of ISIS. This is something that's been identified by U.S. counterterrorism intelligence officials that's actually overseeing and directing these plots in Europe. This isn't just homegrown extremism. This isn't just inspired. This is actually a wing of ISIS that is solely dedicated to sort of not just inspiring, but planning and directing these types of operations in Europe. And
they come directly from Syria to Europe, and then they recruit.
That's right. Well, some of what they do is they'll recruit some locals maybe to help them out, but also you'll have a number of recruits who have already gone over to Syria and Iraq, have been trained, and are sent back to help the operation out. So it's sort of both. But what we've seen in Paris and in Brussels is you have guys who were trained in Syria and Iraq in explosives, in handling their firearms, and then are sent back to Europe to commit these attacks. That's the important thing. And they're under the direction of a specific part of ISIS that does this.
Investigators said when they were able to kill the second in command of ISIS, the money man, that they received information in the Brussels attack that directly linked them to him. So you know that it's high-level communications then.
That's right. This is a guy named Kaddouli, who's a long-time ISIS commander, a leader. He's a guy who goes back to the late 1990s with an al-Qaeda pedigree. He's someone who traveled reportedly to Afghanistan and actually swore allegiance to bin Laden before the rise of ISIS. This is a guy who's been thinking about this sort of thing for a long time. And we saw last week the Defense Department, during the press conference when they announced his death, they said that he was involved in the external operations or external affairs of ISIS, and that means that he's involved or as a hand in these plots in the West and Europe.
So why were they not able to connect the dots?
This is what's really troublesome here, and the most worrisome part about all this is some of these guys are known terrorists. They're known terrorists to U.S. intelligence and counterterrorism, to European intelligence and counterterrorism.
Well, there was a list. It was put out in Belgium. It was about, what, in June of this past year, and then the Paris attacks happened in November. So that list included at least 3 names of the Paris attackers.
Sure. I mean, Abdelhamid Haboud, who was the key ringleader of the Paris attacks, he was advertised in an ISIS magazine in English called Dabiq early in 2015. He was saying, you know, I'm coming to attack you, and he was basically taunting Belgian and French security services for failing to stop him. This is what's really troublesome here. It's not like they don't tell us they're coming. They say they're coming. They say they're going to hit us. They say they're going to hit France and Belgium, and then they do. And yet they're still not being stopped. And that's the problem. And the reason for that is that right now, if you talk to intelligence and counterterrorism officials, they have more threats to face now than ever, and they can't track them all. And so now what's happening is professional terrorists are slipping through the cracks.
All right, finally, we've been told that in all 50 states, there are ISIS-related investigations going on. How do we stop it from coming here, and is it really a danger that it will?
Well, see, here's the problem with that, right? Some of these investigations, perhaps many of them, are just noise. They're just sort of wannabes who are downloading ISIS propaganda, and maybe they pose some level of threat, maybe they don't. Some of those homegrown sort of types may rise to the level we see in San Bernardino. Many of them won't. But here's the problem. So many of these threats we face today, it opens up the possibility for the professional terrorists to slip in and execute something like Paris or Brussels. And that's really my #1 concern, is that somebody who's trained and really has the skill and expertise to do this can cause mass casualty here in the U.S. now.
All right, thank you so much. We appreciate it, and let's certainly hope that that doesn't happen.